Thank you. And if everyone is comfortable, but even if you're not, how do you feel about doing this instead of this? It's just that, oh, yeah, good on you, thanks. It's just that as an autistic adult who was once an autistic child, people forget we grow up, with a lot of sensory discomforts. So I have my earplugs in my pocket. Clapping is actually quite uncomfortable, but because I believe in inclusion, I know there are some people who need a clap, otherwise they don't feel validated. But if you're happy doing this, this is great for me. So thank you. So this is called Living a Good Autistic Life, and I can only talk really about my life. I can mention that I have two autistic children who are now 45 and 43, or the youngest is 36. The middle one we're unsure about. She's still questioning, but she certainly has a lot of other issues that she lives with. She has two children, two daughters, two my granddaughters, and they are both autistic as well. And my older boy's youngest is also on the spectrum. So we keep it in the family. It's just, sorry, I shouldn't wobble things. I get a bit excited. So I can talk only from my experience. I'm also a researcher, I'm a psychologist, and I can talk about some of the research. Things I use to help share my experience, and I'm hoping to sell some books, are things like my poetry, and this book is on sale. They're all greatly reduced, because I don't want to take them home, really. There's another book called The Passionate Mind, which is a really accessible book, lots of illustrations, especially for school and for teachers, that talks about lovely things like using interest as part of the curriculum, and it's very exciting to have heard, and I'm not real good at remembering his names. Was it Kirsty? Kirsty. To hear Kirsty talk quite a bit about using interest. If we're going to focus on uncovering something we can share together, then that very often is a young person's interest. And I know, as a parent, it can be like, how do we divert them from this interest? Well, you need to use interest to divert from interest. You know what I mean? Please say yes. Yes. Yeah? So, for example, a young person who's heavily into computing and technology but doesn't want to go out and needs to exercise, there's a little computer chip on an exercise bike. So you can move from one computer situation to another, for example, as a way of using interest. But that's just one thing. So I've got to work through these slides. I need to use the laptop in front of me, but my mate David down here is going to click so that we can try and be in sync. But thanks for your patience if we're not. Next slide, please, David. Oh, I've got to move mine too. Okay. I think we've gone one too many. My ears and eyes may not notice you. My feet and legs stand their ground. What might it be we need to do to turn this all around? Autism needs my interest. This is where we meet. Please take time to invest and share my autism seat. So the thing about being on the spectrum, thank you, we've got a lot more to come. I used to talk in rhyme all the time as a kid. It used to get me into trouble because people thought I was extracting the Michael, but actually it wasn't taking the Mickey and just to interpret for you. It was that was the way my head worked. So what we know about the autistic brain from research that's been done across the world really, but mostly in the States, is that the brain as an autistic person is very single-minded, and this is a default setting, not a choice. So it's the way that my head is working to make sense of things. So I need you to join me there. We've already seen what happened with the deaf community, these young people here who were saying, join me here, weren't they? Please say yes. They were. So I'm saying, for autism, I need you to join me here too. This is the way I'm made. Next slide, please. So what to expect from this presentation? Some words from Wenn's personal journey of navigating life and school as an autistic individual. Things that help, things that don't, success or simply coping? Next slide, please. So thinking back. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Wish that time would make more sense. If it's then, what is now? And why do children enjoy pretense? So much confusion around me at school with kids pretending all the time. I often thought they were lying. They'd say things and not do them. Even teachers did this too. So they'd say things like, leave the door open. Next minute they'd close it. So which did they mean, eh? Open or shut? Make your mind up. All right? What I was not understanding was that things change. And we open the door for this and we close it for that. But it was never explained. So often things like that would cause a lot of confusion. I couldn't find the words to answer the questions, so the best thing to say was yes to everything. It got me into less trouble than no, but it didn't mean I understood as we go. Do you understand what I mean? So those sorts of things were a big issue for me as a kid in school. Next slide, please. Oh, we've got to do the same. So starting school, for me, they tried to send me to school when I was 5, which didn't work. They kept me home for another year and tried again when I was 6. I didn't have any language till I was almost 5. I wasn't toilet trained. I don't know how you train toilets, but that's the expression they use. So, peeing and pooing my pants and things was like, I didn't notice until it was after the event. And then because over time, when I began to realise this didn't happen with other young people, other kids, I began to be really uncomfortable and not tell anybody. And then someone would point this out to me and say, you need to go to the bathroom or the loo. And I'd say, no, I don't, because I didn't, because I'd already done it. Yeah? So one of those products of a single-focused brain is being very literal. So saying yes to everything just got me into less trouble than no. The office was brown and dull when I started school because they introduced me in an office with the headmistress at the time. I remember it was really difficult to know where the walls ended and the doors began because it all looked the same. I couldn't tell. For me, this kind of setting with its indistinguishable entries and exits meant my walking into things. Walls, for example. I was always walking into things, and people used to say things like, look where you're going. Now, looking where you're going isn't helpful if where you're going looks the same as everywhere else. Does that make sense? Oh, so pleased you're saying yes, that's good. Okay, next slide, please. Today, I find painting walls and doorways different colours, and this assists me to separate them. And it's useful. I mean, even this room, which is kind of all the same, don't look at the patterned carpet, it's disturbing. It is. I mean, where are you supposed to go with all those things? But the door at the back, at least, is a darker colour than the rest. And that, to me, is helpful. Erlin lenses, which I'm wearing, and if you read the literature, it doesn't support, the research doesn't support Erlin lenses, but anecdotally, if you talk to a lot of autistic people, it does. And honestly, if you've got a young person who's having problems, I'm dyslexic as well as autistic, I'm dyspraxic, and a few other things, ADHD, not that you would ever know, always still not. The lenses I found really helpful. If you're unsure and you think it might be helpful, you can get a pack of those coloured Perspex coloured folders from Officeworks, hey? And you can take a favourite drawing picture, piece of writing, and put it in the separate coloured sheets, yellow, pink, purple, blue. And if a young person is more drawn to it when it's in the yellow, or the green, or the blue, or the pink, maybe they would benefit from an overlay at school on their work. Maybe that would help them make sense of what they're looking at. So what I'm saying is if it works, use it. If it doesn't, don't. Don't fix if it ain't broken. But you've got to know. They help me with reading, judging distance, so less walking into things, which is useful. Coping with light. I don't mind, these lights are pretty good. But sometimes you're in places with lots of fluorescent lights. Schools, shopping malls, medical centres, they all use them. And that's really uncomfortable. And they're a trigger for epilepsy, and I'm an epileptic, so that's not helpful either. But all that information doesn't stop them using them because they're cheaper, apparently. Anyway, then, as a child, I look like them, but inside my head, I'm different. different with thinking, different with being, different, different, different. I don't like the word disordered, autism spectrum disorder. I don't like it because it doesn't represent me. Very different, sure. I love that emphasis about, I think it was Kirsten who said, you get to there a different way. That was exciting for me to hear. I mightn't do it the usual way, but I can get there differently. And we need to understand and appreciate how that applies to us as autistic people. Next slide, please, David. I'm so worried I won't finish all this in time. Transition. There's lots of movement and change in our lives for everybody. And it's important to know how to deal with some of that change. And we've got to build resilience to change in our young people. I get that. But it's terrifying. It's so scary. When Kirsten mentioned the daughter who had the problem with the change in the timetable, I totally get that. And I'm thinking, why do they set things in stone on timetables? Why does it say English, second 2 periods, then maths, and then this, and then you get to school and they say, well, no, we're not doing swimming. And I'm saying, but I got my togs, I'm doing swimming. No, you're not, it's on the timetable. The swimming place, I don't know, is being refurbished. The coach had a puncture. There's all sorts of reasons. I don't care. It's on the timetable. It's on the timetable, I do it, right? You're always telling me to follow the timetable. So here I am, and I'm ready. Oh, I'm so anxious, I'll tell you. Why don't they have the main event, which is what is timetabled, and 2 other lesser events sitting in the timetable that could occur? It's a simple thing. Statistically, if you just had a couple, 50-50, not so good. But if you had 1 out of 3, much wiser. Much more likely, okay, we're supposed to have English, but instead of English it might be, I don't know, it might be some games, computing games would be nice. It might be reading time in the library. Just knowing that there's a possibility. Now, for some young people, they'd be terrified even more because, oh no, there's a possibility, which one is it going to be? But honestly, if you have this pictorially represented and you practice it and you understand about change, it's a lot easier to cope with. Visiting teachers and people that come into the school, oh, scary as. You're telling me my teacher is Mrs. Smith, the maths teacher, and here we got Mr. Jones, and you've never seen him before? Oh, did you lie? Did you lie? Say no. No, absolutely not. It was a change. Well, I didn't understand it. So my math teacher isn't this person. It's usually, but today. Explain things to me. Have a fuzzy cut-out picture of a visitor. You can cut them out of a magazine. It doesn't have to look like the very person who's coming. You can't even tell which gender they are. That's okay. It's representative of the possibility. And then say, we don't have this visiting teacher today, we don't have a visiting teacher today, we have Mr. Jones, or whatever. Transition. Autism is, I like it here, please do let me stay. Autism is, I know it here, please don't take me away. If and when I leave this place to travel to another space, I need to know it right away. I need to know that I'm okay. Transition is so fleeting, it leaves not time to stay. Will I have time to settle, or will I be whisked away? I know that change can happen. I know it can take time, but how can I know what this will mean for mine? Transition is about moving to where or what, one asks. This is my very question, from present or the past. Time for me is all the same. I'll say that again. Time for me is all the same. I know not of its future. I only know I trust in now. Tomorrow can come. I just need to know how. Now, there are some young people on the autism spectrum who have what we call a PDA profile, commonly known as pathological demand avoidance. I don't use the word pathological. Personally, I say persistent demand avoidance. And this is, they don't respond to structure. They don't respond to being told. They respond to negotiation and including them in the process. Now, if you have a young person like that, we're talking inclusion here. We need schools to take that concept on board too. It's part of the autistic profile. It's like a profile that's a little bit separate and different, but it's still autism because these kids are rigid in their avoidance. These kids have a lot of communication issues. They're a lot more sociable, but less cluey about how to go through it. Does that make sense? So some of what I'm taking, you'll have to say, oh, that doesn't fit this young person. No, it might not. What will fit is what you need to work with. What will fit is what you need to work with. Next slide, please. So what is the answer to how? How do I know what how to means? Can you please explain? What if others get the rules, but I don't know the game? What's the best way to inform? And if that doesn't work, what's the norm? So put your hand up if you have, I don't know, a regular coffee that's white. Flat white, I think they call it. Oh, some of you, no worries. We can cope. What if you're a tea drinker, no milk? It's all right. No, that's good. Yep, you're okay. Keep doing it. What if you're a cappuccino person? Yeah? A few, less of you. Latte? Yeah, a few more. So which one of these is normal? Coffee, of course it is. Isn't it what's the norm for you, eh? Yeah, what's the norm for you? So we need to discover what is the norm for this young person. What is it that they respond to? All the things that Kirsty. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. It's that thing with names. I'm not real good. You used to see me at work. No, you don't want to see me at work. It's that thing that Kirsty said about finding what works for that young person, finding what's their brilliance, finding what's their satisfaction, finding what's their interest, and so on. I know it's hard getting schools to note and to listen, but that's part of the job of our department. So if you're having a problem with it, you call on our department, the complex needs team, and we hopefully can sort out the school. I know, you wish. Oh, dear me. Working on it, drip by drip. No, I shouldn't say that. Drop by drop? That's not right either, is it? Anyway, bit by bit. Okay, next slide, please. Teacher asked me to go out, so I was pondering upon this. Mum goes out to the shops, I thought. Dad goes out to work, and sometimes to the pub. Which one does teacher want me to do? So, can you see the problem here? Yes. Next slide, please. Don't you want to go out to play? I repeated her words. I was very echolalic as a kid. That means I echoed things back, especially adverts and things from TV. Don't you want to go out to play? Sometimes echoing back makes it easier to work things out. So if a kid is echoing, don't stop them, because it's actually really useful in helping them build an access way to language. But it still took ages. Echoing helped build vocabulary and eventual understanding over time. And I've had people say to me when we talk about using visuals, oh, but he's got good language skills, so you stop using the visuals and language slides back. Don't stop using them if this young person still needs that backup. Keep going. I'm not a visual learner. I'm not a person who does well with visuals. I'm a word person. So you've got to get to know what's norm for that young person. Have you heard of or seen young kids who will just take all the posters down from the class and rip things off the walls? Yeah, well, what are they saying to you? These get in the way. These are interfering. I've got to get rid of them. So if that's the case, maybe that's not the best way for them. It might be that they need things written down or acted out or put across differently. Next slide, please. Being alone in the playground was usual. In my thinking, it was, why did children do what they did? And how did they understand words? Why was teacher so often cross? And he often were. Or as it was? Was? Okay. He was, they were, yeah? Whew, that's a relief. So although I have a passion for words and I love them, they still are a tangle in my thinking. I still have to untangle them. And it was really hard because most of the playground activity happened with words and what else? What else do kids use? A lot of noise, okay. What else do they use? Words, noise, and they do run around a lot. Body language is what I'm after. They read each other. We call it the hidden curriculum. The way of knowing about something that isn't verbally expressed. They look at each other and they seem to know what those things mean. They signal to one another. No idea what that was all about. Still have a lot of issue with that. I don't like you've heard of eye contact? I mean, why would you want to contact someone's eyes? Bizarre, really odd. Non-autistic people are really strange, and they do some weird things. I remember contacting my books at school with rolls of contact that were very sticky on one side. And I know you're all too young, but in my era, we put contact over our books to keep them nice. Yeah. So why would you want to cover your eyes? Didn't make any sense to me. What people mean is that quite often people look at each other when they're communicating. Is that right? Even if they don't speak, they still look. Yeah? So when people say things like, people say a lot with the eyes. The eyes tell you everything. The eyes are the window to a person's soul. That's scary. So I have windows in my house. Another concept, metaphor, oh dear. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, what I encourage young people to do, and kids, is to look in someone's particular direction, toward their eyebrows, or around their mouth, so that you give an appearance of looking. Because for us as autistic people, looking can sometimes be so overwhelming. All the information that's coming back from somebody's eyes and face, by the time I've decoded that, I might then have had an opportunity to think about what I need to say, but they've gone. It takes too long. It's overwhelming. So I do look at people I know, my cat in particular. She was very responsive. My wife and kids, we can look at each other, that's fine, because we know. We often don't have a lot of eye contact. It's quite interesting. We often sit side by side rather than across the table from each other, because it's a lot easier to hear if we're not looking. One of those things about coming from a single-focused brain is we do one thing, then the next, not several at once. So why would you listen if you want to look? And why would you look if you want to hear? Those sorts of things are quite done differently as an autistic person. Next slide, please, David. What is play? When, I hear the teacher say, when, look this way. When, I hear the children say, when, come and play. I hear the words that come each day. What do they mean? I hear me say. Words without pictures simply go away. I turn my head and look instead at all that glitters, blue, green and red. Next slide, please. You'll like it here, Father speaks. Come and play with Billy. Inside my head, my brain just freaks. How can they be so silly? Why would I want to do this thing? My mind can find no reason. Please, leave me with the sparkly string. This gives me such a feeling. I can feel it just talking about it. So you can keep your string in your pockets, or you can take it out if you want to. It's fine by me. If you can't relate to, typical things that other people might relate to, although I suspect that it's less typical than we think, then maybe you find something else that does. And if you have a sensory system that's either underwhelmed or overwhelmed, you like to take something that might be connecting for you. It's why we have something like Pika. Who's heard of Pika? Yeah, where kids put bits of grit and sticks and stone and glass and poo sometimes in their mouths. Why do they do that? Isn't it disgusting? No. For them, it's connecting. You're finding something that you eventually can feel when you mightn't be able to feel the other stuff. So if you have a sensory system like that, we have to work with that young person differently. We can't work with them. It's no good just saying, don't do that, because they are doing it. Do you get that? So they know you're lying. Yeah? And you don't say you can't do that, because they can. They are. So that sort of wording and instructions don't work so well for autistic people. Next slide, please, David. So books for when in the past. I love books. I have rows and rows of books, shelves and shelves of books. I lined them up, I straightened them up. I never read them for a very long time, but I had a real passion for them. One of the things that was so lovely was how the pages always fall back when you flick through. It just landed back in top of each other, which was very exciting for me. And the smell of a book. Oh, right, love it. It was just so lovely to see how the pages always fell back onto themselves. Time and time again, each page left its place as I flicked it, then landed right back again. And I never tired of this game. Each and every time it intrigued me. So imagine if a young person isn't connecting to words as language till they're 5-ish. I didn't read till I was about 9. And then I didn't recognize that words that I read were similar to words people used in a conversation. I didn't make that connection until I was 13. So in autism, we talk about developmental delay, not cancellation. Things can take us longer, but it might mean we get there. So I did high school years, 11 and 12, at the age of 38. It's much more exciting. By then they had computers. They didn't have those when I was at school. And the other 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds taught me how to use, it was then a 386. See, I'm definitely older than most of you. You don't remember. Word Perfect. Anybody remember Word Perfect? Yeah. Oh, I was so excited. When you're dyslexic and you can't spell, and I didn't know about putting spaces, so all my words were right next to each other. And then my mum used to say when I was younger, you put your finger there, and then you've got a space. Then she'd take her finger away, and I'd write the words next to each other again. No, you've got to put your finger there and create a space, and she'd take her finger away. It didn't connect to me. But once you can take pictures of things, and you can put them together as a story, or video it even, and I can watch that. That's why we love YouTube. Oh, isn't YouTube amazing? Say yes. I know, 12 hours a day could be a bit uncomfortable for some of you. It can be a bit difficult to separate, but it grabs our attention, and it's connecting. So it's why we love it. Next slide, please. Today I enjoy books and reading. It took me a long time to notice books were more than just pages falling beautifully into line. Words are one way I make sense of my world. It's a very helpful strategy. The written word is especially useful, as long as it's connected to an interest of mine. I have a passion for science fiction. You didn't know that by looking at that slide, did you? Oh, thank you. Somebody did. And what's it called? The heroes? There's a word. Oh, yeah, definitely the Avengers. But in general, we have a term for superheroes, and comic cartoon characters, and they're often something as autistic people we relate to beautifully. So when we're writing a video story, we take a young person's interest in their character, and we place that character at the center of the story. So it isn't mum or dad or teacher saying, it's Fireman Sam, for example. It's the person out of, what's that video called? The grandkids always watch. Frozen. Yeah, when you've watched it for the 10th time, including all the credits, you get to know it. But I still forget the names of the characters. So using something of someone's interest, right central, don't take it away, use it centrally to all your teaching, including at home as parents, is a better way to go. Next slide, please. Then why don't people say what they mean? You have to go to school now. For example, they don't say, school now, but later you will come home again. Why don't you say that? You don't say it to non-autistic kids because they seem to connect and know. They can forward think. Now, forward thinking takes a brain that's guided by an ability to divide attention, now and then. That's a division of attention. Very hard. As an autistic person with a brain that's default setting, working with single attention, I don't have that ability in the same way to divide attention. School now, but later you'll come home again. For me, every day I left my home, my room, not ever knowing if I would return, and that was terrifying and awful. Getting me out of the door, getting me out of the car. Well, we didn't have a car when I was first going to school. Getting me onto a bus. It was awful. It was awful. I was constantly scared and so incredibly alone. I cannot tell you how awful that was. Now I structure my day so I know start and finish. Now, sometimes finish means forever. Sometimes it means just for today. So you might need to add that on. Because how am I going to know? You know, I remember going to a doctor's place and the doctor said, sorry, hop up on the couch for a minute while I talk to Mum. Thank you. So there I am, on the couch, hopping, counting to 60 for a minute. Ah, dear me. I know, drippy nose, too much information, sorry. So what did doctor mean? Sit there and wait. Because how long is wait? How long is stop? I need some structure or some information around that. Stop for now, wait till I tell you. Those sorts of things would be really useful. Next slide, please. What is time? I tried to climb the big oak tree, scampered across and scraped my knee. I walked for hours, picked some flowers. If only I could just be me. I watched the boy who lived next door. He had a kite. I watched it soar. He had a bike, the boy next door. He had a car. I heard it roar. Next slide, please. The boy next door then moved away. So did his kite and bike and car, they say. I watched and listened just in case, but they were gone, and in their place, the boy next door just was no more. Just was no more. So did they really exist, or were they just a dream? How can they be there and then be not? Is it like something that Wenn forgot? Trying to build a concept of what is now, what is next, what is yesterday, what is tomorrow. Why would I put my clothes on? Why do I take them off? Where do I take them off? Can I take them off now? No, this is in the middle of the street. So where, how, all of those things I need to know and understand. Because I don't have, or didn't have, so I'm keeping them on now. I pulled them up, got my clothes on. But it is hard when you don't have a concept of time. And growing up with all this confusion and misunderstanding, you can imagine the trauma that is actually being created for that young person. And then who gets into trouble? Me. Sometimes parents. I remember having my son in the supermarket and somebody behind us in the line saying my son needed a good belting. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't say that today, hopefully. This is going back a bit, because they thought he was naughty and not disciplined. No, he was just not understanding the process. And I was learning then as a parent even how to explain things to him that I didn't get myself. So it was tough. Next slide, please. Life should be fun, interesting, and not too difficult to navigate. Wouldn't that be nice? But what if daily expectations don't make much sense to you? How would you feel? How might you behave, You behave scared. You behave willful. Some of our kids have got really strong personalities, and they'd be great politicians, I tell you. That's just why we have a lot of autistic politicians. You know that, don't you? Got to be careful. It's a good job he left. Yeah, thank you. It's true. Somewhere where you need to focus in on what you're doing, that's a very good opportunity for a lot of people with an autistic mind. A lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, a lot of kids who can pick the bits of fluff off carpets. They notice things you might not. Next slide, please. Words. Communication, orchestration, and any other ation can lure and connive its path on people's thoughts and others' behalf. But what of us autistics? We think and we ponder, or you lot sit and wonder, what is exactly going on, you say, within your mind? Next slide. We know without a doubt, but you need time to work it out. For us, it's all so simple. Words are what they seem to be. To us, there is no problem. Next slide. Herein lies the hitch, you see. Words for you or words for me, we tend to view things differently. And that's got to do with being literal. It's got to do with problems around understanding metaphor. It's got to do with a real need for me to explain what you mean and mean what you say. If you don't mean it, please don't say it. If you don't mean it, please don't say it. Next slide. When I hear the words, "When aren't you changed yet?" I only felt scared. What was it? I was meant to become? What might I change into? What and when might this change occur? You see how complicated this is. When would it be? Would it be a sudden change? Am I going to become a leopard, a lizard? What am I going to change into? This was about PE at school. And a teacher, I remember her being like, here's your PE things, you're supposed to change into them. But I wasn't changed, and I didn't know when the change might come, and it was all really uncomfortable. Say what you mean what you say. If you mean change your clothes and put these ones on, say that. Don't just say get changed. Next slide, please. So this is me. I'm not real good with time. I'm all right with time, David? How long we got? Okay. Mightn't get through all this, but that's all right. So this is me. Tweedledum and Tweedledum. No, start again. Tweedledee and Tweedledum. How on earth have I begun? I started out all right, you see, but now I question, who is me? Which of these I know so well? How I wish that I could tell. If only you could stay the same, I'd work the rules out for this game. Next slide. They call the movie life, you see, but which is them and which is me? I know for me the words serve well, but as for others, who can tell? I thought I'd got it, but then came the shock. You lot knew it, but I did not. It's a really uncomfortable feeling, thinking at last you've worked something out and then they go and change it again. Whereas you're on board, and change isn't comfortable for anybody. You don't like it either, really. When might you like change? When might you like it? If it's somewhat positive for us, so you've designed it, you've thought through the process of how it will happen, so do that with us. Do that with us. Because you can do that in your heads, but I might need it more put out there in a story, in a series of pictures, pre-videoed, some way that will help me to know. Next slide, please. It might be easy to realise that structure in our day is useful. What individuals sometimes fail to recognise, though, is that many of us also need our free time structured. Oh, dear. As it is, I find it difficult to understand the concept of free time. The first time this happened to me, I was at a visiting school, and headmistress would take me back to her place. This was in Perth somewhere, I think WA. And she said, okay, you've got some free time now. I'll be back in a couple of hours, and I'll collect you and we'll go back to the school. So I sat on the chair, I had no idea what to do. I was still on the chair when she came back, still no idea what to do. What is free time? Time we don't usually pay for, or what? Pardon? Oh, thank you. Very, very difficult to navigate and understanding. If you mean time for you where you don't have to work, where you could read, say that. Next slide, please. When this is your time now, time for you to switch off and relax as a friend. This is all well and good if one has a concept for free time. Relax, switch off, sure. Show me where the switch is. It can be so hard for some of us. Rumination is common in autism, especially in girls. And being able to switch your head off from what you've been thinking about can be really hard. My wife will say things like, write something down, and she'll fold it, and she'll put it in a box with the lid on, that's for tomorrow. You're not allowed to look at that or think about it anymore. Instead, you're going to think about this, and we do something, watch something, listen to something, and change that one concept for another to help decrease some of my anxiety. Next slide, please. Relating to others. Initially, I tried relating to others through the characters of my favourite TV shows. I talked with an American accent, replaying a variety of scripts. And I was really good. I had a great American accent, but it didn't work. I was trying to be what I thought was what friends did and kids did, but I got it wrong. Today I choose my friends more wisely and spend time with those who share the same values and appreciations. But that's taken years to work out and understand. I've got to go faster because of the time. There's much more information in the books. Okay, next slide, please. Initially, I didn't know how to be appropriate with other people, so I was so inappropriate. I attached myself to others and was like their shadow. Couldn't connect with life unless I was with them. Again, much more common in females, for whatever reason. Seeking out somebody and living your life through that person. That's how I accessed everything. If they weren't there, if they weren't at school for that day, it was awful. I couldn't go either. And unfortunately, the pressure on that one person is hideous. It's not right and it's not okay, but this is what happened for me because nobody else showed me any other way. Now I know who I am. I mostly accept what I am, who I am, and I work with people who accept me for what I'm good at too. It can be hard at work when I'm going through from my little pod area to the kitchen and somebody might talk to me and I'm trying to work out what I'm supposed to say. One of the nice people at work came up one morning because I tend to get to work by about 7, and he leaned over and he said, "Did you wet your bed?" I was like, what's he telling me? I got up and looked at my pants. I thought, no, I didn't wear anything as far as I know. It was really awful. And then he smiled and walked off. And later that morning, when some more people came in, I shared this with them and they said, "Oh, he just meant you're here early. So did you wet your bed and have to get up?" Well, I told you, non-autistic people are a bit odd and can take some getting used to. Next slide, please. Attention. I tend to attend to one thing at one time. This means that eye contact or looking at a person or trying to listen. I've said this stuff, so I'm going to go and move to the next slide, please, David. During uni, I couldn't listen to a lecturer and take notes, for example. That was something I couldn't do. So did it mean that I therefore couldn't learn? Did it mean that I shouldn't be at uni? I don't have the ability. No, I learned differently. So I was given a note taker, somebody who took notes for me. I was able to record lectures and things. This should have happened in school too, but it didn't. It should have happened in school so that I had some way of building up to an understanding before I got to uni. In everyday life, when people speak too quickly, I can either ask them to slow down or I can limit the time I have with them, and it's common for me to do both. In the past, people have gone, "Hello, Wenn, how are you?" So I thought, obviously, he didn't know his Wheaties. I mean, it's a bit odd. You don't need to yell. I'm not deaf. You know, some of us are, but I'm not. And you don't need to slow down and talk to me like I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm just autistic. And there's a big difference. And we need to teach people that stuff because they don't know what to do. When an autistic person doesn't respond fast enough, they don't know what to do. We were talking before the sessions began this morning about attachment and parenting, and we were saying, you know, if you don't get feedback from a baby, as a parent, you don't know what you're meant to do. So what you're meant to do is get to know that little person and maybe relate to them differently. So that if you're not getting feedback, find a way that you can. Whether it's rough and tumble, whatever it is, connect. Because without connection to who I am as a person, you won't get feedback that you're valued and wanted. You might reject me, and this will create trauma, and that goes on as a pattern throughout my life. So find a way to relate, even when we're little. And I know it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I had 2 autistic sons. I know how hard it was. Music was one thing that connected with one young man, and he's a brilliant musician today. Another was Lego when they were little. So those were 2 things that we used all the time till they got quite a bit older to build an understanding. Next slide, please. It only takes one person to believe in you. If individuals are not motivated or not able to access learning in typical ways, it's our responsibility to facilitate their learning by presenting it in a way that is accessible for them. Therefore, we need to get to know them and work out what might work best for them. Then we need to implement plans and make it happen. Honestly, as a parent, I was trying to just survive when the kids were younger. I don't want to upset anybody, but for 62 years of my life, I lived as a female. So I've only been male, as in outward appearance, for the last 6 years. So it's taken me a long time to get to an understanding of me. But I know what it's like to bear kids. I know what it's like to breastfeed. That was wonderful. I loved it. I didn't like anybody else playing with my breasts. We won't go there on this conversation. It's a different thing, sensory stuff. Sometimes when I'm kissing my wife, she says, is that enough now? Can we stop? Okay, too much information. You've got to work it out. You've got to get to know and accept one another for who we are. I think I was trying to say something and I went off on another track. Never mind. It's in the books. And she's written a book with me on our transition story. I suppose what I was trying to say is I understand what it's like to be female. I've always been male, but it's taken a long time for that gender identity to connect for me. It's one of those things as autistic people, joining the dots can take us a bit longer. Next slide, please. If people only see the negative and constantly tell you off, self-esteem plunges. And this will be true for you guys too. I need to know what I'm feeling, what I can do, and how to do it. To label distress reactions as intolerable, challenging behaviours does not tell me what to do when I am distressed. And if you guys knew how challenging you were, as non-autistic people, and some of you probably are non-autistic, not meaning to upset anybody, you'd understand why it's so challenging for us, I hope. And next slide, please. When life is so very scary all the time, it's easiest to retreat into obsessive behaviour rather than face your fears, especially when you don't even understand why you are scared or what it's all about. And we often don't. Next slide, please. People tend to say, don't be scared. Stupid thing to say. I am scared. Don't keep telling me not to be. I need you to understand why I'm scared. I need you to understand what's happening, and so that we can get it sorted. I need to gain the understanding that when is okay. To get this, I need to have support in giving me suitable explanations of events, of timing, and of expected outcomes. This is stuff you know, and probably practice, I hope. Next slide, please. My coping has changed over time. When I was young, I used being outside and away from demand. I used to run a lot, run, to help me cope with life. I loved to go for long walks. It seemed the further that I walked, the more distance I was putting between myself and what I didn't understand. Today, I still love the bush, the ocean, nature, animals, and so on. Next slide, please, but I use them differently. I have lots of passions, and these change over time. I love smooth material, stroking it between my fingers or my legs, especially ladies' tights. They don't wear them so much these days. But you're not allowed to go up on a tram and stroke someone's legs. Gets you into trouble. I know about these things. I also love spinning objects around and around. Whenever I was upset, I could retreat to one of those things and find comfort again. You probably do a similar thing in a glass of wine and a cup of coffee, your favourite chair or programme. It's no different. It's just that we do things differently. Next slide, please. Non-autistics can take in and process information more easily than we do. They do this because they can integrate lots of information coming into their minds from seeing, listening, feeling, all at the same time, because you've got the brain that can manage that. We focus on what captures our attention. Sometimes what captures our attention is anxiety. So you need to look behind that. A great skill and useful for me in my research and study is my single focused attention. That's a great skill. But it's also my worst enemy, because it can focus me on something that I need to be thinking differently about. So the skill for you guys, I think, is knowing how to work out with us, how to get beyond that. Next slide, please. So, okay, 10 minutes. Try not to rush like a train through all this, because you'll smash it and it won't be any good. I've got an awful picture now. Train, stop. Okay, some good things about being autistic, and there are many. I can enjoy the quiet and peaceful feeling of my own space. I can focus on a desired object, coloured sign, butterfly, bird, or a specific study topic for hours. This means that by that being committed to the study of my choice isn't difficult for me. I remember at uni, students used to do things like write their essay the night before. I had mine done a month ago. They used to do things like go to parties and meet in each other's homes and get drunk and then throw up. I thought, what a waste of time. What a waste of time. But there you go, we're all different. Next slide. The worst thing for me about being autistic is my experience of being disconnected from people and understanding things the way that they do. Life appears as a video that I watch, but so often cannot partake in. However, now I know that I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid, only autistic. Next slide, please. I grew up believing that my difficulties in everyday life were because I was not as intelligent as other people. Getting a diagnosis helped me understand who I am, what I do, why I cannot do some things. But there's a big emphasis on I can. I can. That's my youngest granddaughter. She's 4. Totally gorgeous. She's autistic. Next slide. Coming to terms with my limitations has been a hard but very important process. I still don't like this uneven ability. I bet you don't like the things you can't do sometimes, do you? You don't like it if you can't read maps. I know we've got GPS. You might not like it if you do whatever, but you accept that and you focus on the things you do well. I often feel very foolish and cross with myself when I can't seem to understand something that other people seem to know so well. Part of the reason for my need of rules, rituals, and routines is to stave off confusion, chaos, and subsequent terror. Okay, at the end of this lecture, you're all going to hand in your phones, your diaries. That's a joke. Yeah, wouldn't you be a bit lost without them? Yeah. So imagine that and, triple it. Don't. It's awful. Next slide. For example, some people might not be speaking to me, might just be speaking to me, but I might experience as someone projecting into my thinking and conversation. I feel almost violated because they suddenly appear and start talking to you. How dare they interrupt my space and distract me from my course? Didn't they know? Didn't they understand that I would have to start right back at the beginning of my thought and try and capture it and replan it? No, they didn't, because that doesn't happen for them. Doesn't happen for them. And sometimes with Kelly at work, she's got her headphones on. I try and go around the front of her so she can see me before I speak to her, because so often people will come up and just start talking. And it's like such a horrible discomfort. Sorry, next slide. You see, most people talk to each other quite often. They don't need to put their thoughts on hold to do this or even take time to go back to the beginning of their sequence of events after the conversation finishes. They're not autistic. They can move from one thing to the other most of the time. Next slide, please. Understanding of everyday life is governed by concepts such as right, wrong, up, down, yours, mine, time and space, and so on. Concepts take time and effort to discover and to capture. For me, poetry is a helpful tool in that process. That's for me. Music for my son. For my other son, he's a chef. And we did all sorts of things through recipes. A recipe for showering. A recipe for bus catching. I know he took different buses to get where he could have gone. He could have done it in half the time, but never mind, he got there. Recipes for everything, and now he works as a chef, and he's a chief chef. He phoned me up one day and he said, "Mum, I am Mum, I'm just a man, Mum." You didn't know they existed till you met me, did you? He rang me up and he said, "I have two other chefs under me." And he said, "No, I'm not sitting on them, Mum. What I mean is," he's now the senior chef in the restaurant. And I used to have terrible, terrible nightmares about him. He trips over his own feet, this young man, but not in the kitchen. He's amazing. You go into his room and you'd rather not, you just shut the door and walk out. But everything's in its order because he's working within his passion. He's working with his interest. Okay, 3 minutes, so I'll read you this last poem. My love, it wasn't always this way. The joy of knowing you and sharing in your life has taught me that I am able to love and accept myself. In your presence, I come to life in a way that I have never experienced before. This rag doll who is losing its stuffing becomes the musical clown, so full of colour and vitality. Next slide. You set me free from the demands of self-introspection and its ugly forest of gloom. In its place, I'm able to walk through sunlit woods and enjoy choruses of birdsong. Next slide. Your smile delights my eyes, and the peace in my soul rose over me like the gentle waves of a calm ocean. So soothing is your voice to my ears that even the roar of my lions within cannot shatter it. Thank you, my love, for your quiet assurance and humble vulnerability. To you I owe a never-ending debt, my life. So I'll stop there and let you know that there are some books for sale. And I know that we have other things to do, but thank you very much for your attention.